Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. The European Union adopts a sweeping new package of sanctions on Russia over the Ukraine war, looking to pile more pressure on the Kremlin by lowering a price cap on Moscow's oil exports. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi tells his European counterparts they have no grounds to reactivate the UN sanctions after they threaten to do so in the coming months if the nuclear talks fail to make progress. More than 5,000 people in South Korea take shelter as heavy rain pounds parts of the country for a third straight day, with the deluge killing at least 4 and destroying property and infrastructure. Dozens of demonstrators gather outside the U.S. Embassy in Kuala Lumpur to protest the proposed appointment of Nick Adams, a self-styled alpha male influencer, as the next U.S. envoy to Malaysia. And Vietnam warns African swine fever outbreaks have been spreading across the Southeast Asian nation, threatening food supplies. Officials say 514 outbreaks have been detected so far this year. Today we begin right here in Washington, where President Donald Trump has been diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency. The White House confirmed this on Thursday. The condition, which affects blood circulation in the legs, was discovered after the president experienced mild swelling in his lower legs. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said President Trump underwent a full medical evaluation, including blood tests and Doppler ultrasounds. The results showed chronic venous insufficiency, a common and usually harmless condition in older adults.
There was no evidence of deep vein thrombosis or arterial disease. Laboratory testing included a complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, coagulation profile, D-dimer, B-type natriuretic peptide, and cardiac biomarkers. All results were within normal limits.
Leavitt further explained that the bruises occurred due to frequent handshaking and the use of aspirin, which is taken as part of a standard cardiovascular prevention regimen.
Additionally, recent photos of the president have shown minor bruising on the back of his hand. This is consistent with minor soft tissue irritation from frequent handshaking and the use of aspirin, which is taken as part of a standard cardiovascular prevention regimen. This is a well-known and benign side effect of aspirin therapy. And the president remains in excellent health, which I think all of you witness on a daily basis here.
Now, CVI occurs when the veins in the legs have difficulty sending blood back to the heart. And this is due to weakened or damaged valves, which also allow blood to pool in the lower limbs. The condition affects an estimated 10 to 35% of U.S. adults, especially those over 70. Common symptoms of CVI include leg swelling, aching, heaviness, varicose veins, and in severe cases, skin changes or ulcers. Photos taken during recent events, including the FIFA World Cup final and meetings with foreign leaders, showed distinct swelling in President Trump's legs and visible hand bruises, prompting questions. The White House said the information was shared to put an end to speculation about the president's health. In fact, back in April, President Trump had also undergone a full physical exam, but CVI was not mentioned at the time. While the diagnosis confirms a chronic condition, doctors say it's manageable and not currently affecting the president's ability to perform his duties. But as President Trump enters the second half of his term, the focus now turns to how he balances his health with the pressures of the office and whether the condition will stay stable in the months ahead. And staying with President Donald Trump, he's now threatening to sue the Wall Street Journal and its owner, Rupert Murdoch, over a resurfaced birthday album made for Jeffrey Epstein. The leather-bound album created for Epstein's 50th birthday allegedly includes a letter attributed to President Donald Trump. The album, reportedly compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell, the former associate of Jeffrey Epstein, contains personal notes from Epstein's high-profile friends and associates. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, one entry features a page allegedly from Donald Trump. It contains several lines of typewritten text surrounded by an outline of a naked woman drawn in black marker. The letter, written in the third person, imagines a conversation between Trump and Epstein, and it allegedly ends with the line, and I quote, "A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret," end quote. The Wall Street Journal says it reviewed a version of the letter bearing Trump's signature, but admits that the origin of the letter is still unclear. Trump, however, denied everything in an interview with the Journal on Tuesday before the story was published.
"This is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women. It's not my language. It's not my words."
Now, during the interview, he reportedly warned the Journal against publishing the article. And on Thursday, the president expressed his frustration on Truth Social after the Wall Street Journal went ahead with the story, calling it fake, malicious, and defamatory. He even claims the paper's editor-in-chief, Emma Tucker, was informed in advance that the letter was fake. However, she went ahead with the story anyway.
The Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch, personally, were warned directly by President Donald J. Trump that the supposed letter they printed by President Trump to Epstein was a fake, and if they print it, they will be sued. Mr. Murdoch stated that he would take care of it, but, obviously, did not have the power to do so. The editor of the Wall Street Journal, Emma Tucker, was told directly by Caroline Leavitt and by President Trump that the letter was a fake, but Emma Tucker didn't want to hear that. Instead, they are going with a false, malicious, and defamatory story anyway.
Now, President Trump lashed out at Rupert Murdoch, threatening to sue him and even labeled the Journal a third-rate newspaper.
The Wall Street Journal printed a fake letter, supposedly to Epstein. These are not my words, not the way I talk. Also, I don't draw pictures. I told Rupert Murdoch it was a scam, that he shouldn't print this fake story. But he did, and now I'm going to sue him, and that of his third-rate newspaper.
And Vice President J.D. Vance also came to Trump's defense, calling the story false and slamming the Journal for never showing the letter to Trump before publication.
The Wall Street Journal should be ashamed for publishing the letter. Where is this letter? Would you be shocked to learn they never showed it to us before publishing it? Does anyone honestly believe this sounds like Donald Trump?
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also criticized the story, questioning the language used in the letter and saying, "When has President Trump ever used language like that?" Donald Trump claims the entire story is a scam perpetrated by the Democrats, and even called on Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any relevant grand jury testimony from the Epstein investigation subject to court approval.
Based on the ridiculous amount of publicity given to Jeffrey Epstein, I have asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony, subject to court approval. This scam, perpetuated by the Democrats, should end right now.
Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently serving time for trafficking underage girls, is believed to have compiled the Epstein birthday album back in 2003. In fact, she's the only former associate of Epstein to be criminally charged. And in a related development, Maureen Comey, the federal prosecutor who worked on the Epstein and Maxwell cases, was suddenly dismissed this week. She's the daughter of James Comey, the former FBI director and frequent Trump critic. Now, this comes as Trump faces renewed scrutiny over his past ties to Epstein and accusations that his administration helped cover up Epstein's network to protect the powerful. The alleged letter and the blowback that followed have once again put the spotlight on Donald Trump's connection to Epstein. And as the fight over truth, media, and accountability escalates, this chapter is far from over. And now to Latin America, where a new trade fight is brewing, and it's getting very personal. Brazil's President Lula is taking direct aim at what he calls a gringo and an emperor. After President Donald Trump threatened 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods, The escalating war of words comes as President Donald Trump's right-wing ally, Jair Bolsonaro, faces a trial over his alleged role in a coup. Now, what began as a technical trade skirmish has now quickly become a test of national pride, sovereignty, and political survival. Our next report has all the details.
Não é gringo que vai dar ordem a esse presidente da República. Não é.
That was President Lula da Silva, delivering his fiercest warning yet to his US counterpart Donald Trump. His comments came as the US Commander-in-Chief threatened to impose 50% tariffs earlier this month on goods from Latin America's largest economy. The measures could hit key Brazilian exports such as crude oil, orange juice, beef, coffee, and aeroplanes. And while the White House claims the tariffs are designed to defend American jobs, Brazil sees them as politically motivated. In a televised national address, Lula called the tariffs quote-unquote unacceptable blackmail and accused the US of interfering in Brazil's domestic affairs. He went further in a separate interview, saying Donald Trump was not elected to be the emperor of the world.
Brazil has always been open to dialogue. We held more than 10 meetings with the U.S. government, and on May 16th we sent them a proposal for negotiation and waited for a response. Trying to interfere in Brazilian justice is a serious attack on national sovereignty. If necessary, we will use all legal instruments to defend our economy.
The White House, however, rejected the charges, with spokesperson Caroline Leavitt reportedly calling President Trump a strong leader and the leader of the free world. But the trade fallout is just one side of the story. The controversy has escalated after President Trump appeared to link the tariff threats to the trial of his right-wing ally, Jair Bolsonaro. The former Brazilian president is accused of trying to overturn the 2022 election and of plotting to assassinate Lula. President Trump has demanded the trial be halted, calling it a witch hunt, and posted a letter to Bolsonaro expressing his support.
I have seen the terrible treatment you are receiving at the hands of an unjust system turned against you. This should end immediately. I am very concerned about the attacks on free speech. I have strongly voiced my disapproval both publicly and through our tariff policy.
Bolsonaro, who is barred from office until 2030, has denied all charges and announced plans to challenge Lula in next year's presidential race, insisting he's the only one who can defeat him. In an interview earlier this week, Bolsonaro praised Trump and thanked him for his continued backing.
I have deep gratitude for him. We had an excellent relationship. We talked about many things around the world. We made many plans. It seems we were even dating. We made many plans for Brazil.
To put this into perspective, until now Brazil had not been among the dozens of countries threatened with US duties above the 10% baseline. The US runs a goods trade surplus with Brazil, which says it repeatedly asked Washington to identify specific areas of concern. But in Brasilia, the shift in trade tone isn't just economic. It's now firmly entrenched in domestic politics. Lula and his ruling Workers' Party have seized on the standoff with a nationalist campaign aimed at boosting the leftist sagging popularity ahead of a re-election run next year. And it may be working. Some opinion polls report a modest rise in the president's approval ratings. But with Brazil now threatening to challenge the tariffs at the WTO and US importers warning of rising prices, this standoff has grown into far more than just a trade dispute. It's a clash of economic nationalism and sovereign justice.
And now to El Salvador, a country once praised for a dramatic drop in gang violence, but now facing growing scrutiny for shrinking civic space and press freedom. In a major blow to civil society, El Salvador's leading human rights organization, Cristosal, has been forced to shut down local operations, blaming what it calls a hostile environment fostered by President Nayib Bukele's government. The NGO, which has long documented abuses committed by both gangs and state actors, is now relocating staff to Guatemala and Honduras.
Cristosal is being forced to suspend its operations in El Salvador and operate from its headquarters in Honduras and Guatemala. This decision responds to an untenable situation of state harassment, direct threats against our staff, the criminalization of human rights defenders, and the imposition of legal frameworks designed to repress the work of human rights defenders.
The rights group says the final straw came in June when its lawyer was arrested under El Salvador's controversial state of emergency laws.
The detention of our colleague Ruth Lopez, lawyer and advocate, is not an isolated case, but a turning point for our organization and for the human rights movement in El Salvador.
Cristosal claims the government has systematically used the justice system to silence opponents, a pattern that began after President Bukele took office in 2019. But while the government has not formally commented on the claims, Bukele has repeatedly dismissed such accusations, insisting human rights groups and foreign media are part of a coordinated attack designed to discredit his government.
The democracy they preach is to do everything possible to impose the message that you can't move forward. As we speak, right now and today, all day and yesterday, there is a coordinated attack going on. Traditional, international, and local media, or in human rights organizations or international institutions, all orchestrated in unison, pushing the same topic.
The president, who remains popular among Salvadorans for his war on gangs, has criticized rights groups for defending those he calls murderers.
Nobody elected them in democratic elections, since we are talking about democracy. Not even in second-grade elections. But they do feel they have the right to influence the country's decisions, with money, with total impunity, the so-called human rights organizations that defend murderers who once massacred our people.
Now, since imposing a state of emergency back in March of 2022, Bukele has allegedly suspended constitutional rights, curtailed freedom of the press, and undermined judicial independence. Human rights groups say thousands of innocent people have been swept up in his gang crackdown, which has resulted in the arrest of more than 85,000 people. And now earlier this year, the government passed a foreign agents law mirroring measures in Russia, China, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, among others, which further curbs critical voices and organizations funded from abroad. The resulting atmosphere of fear has forced dozens of activists and journalists to flee the country in order to protect their lives.
All these measures of persecution, also against other activists that happened weeks ago, is what led me to the decision to leave the country, because I believe that we are more useful doing our work from outside and not from a four-walled cell.
Now, some rights advocates have also pointed to the United States' muted response, arguing that Washington has prioritized migration control and regional stability over democratic values in its dealings with Bukele. Meanwhile, the government has reportedly touted a 95% drop in homicide rates since 2019. But reports suggest nearly 6 in 10 Salvadorans now fear speaking out against a president, worried it could come at a cost. So as El Salvador turns to authoritarian tactics to maintain order, critics warn that the price of security may be democracy itself. And finally, sectarian tensions have erupted once again in Syria as fierce clashes between the Druze community and the Islamist-led government spiraled into full-scale violence. Triggered by the abduction of a Druze merchant in Ceuta, the unrest has killed nearly 600 people since last Sunday. Now, adding to the crisis, Israel has launched a series of military strikes claiming to protect the Druze minority. But that action has drawn condemnation from Arab nations and the United Nations. In our next report, we explain who the Druze actually are and why this little-known community is suddenly at the center of Syria's latest crisis.
A fresh wave of deadly violence has gripped southern Syria. The conflict involves the Druze, a religious minority clashing with the new Islamist-led government in Damascus, and the spark, the abduction of a Druze merchant on 13th July. The result, days of bloody fighting, nearly 600 deaths in Suweda, and Israeli airstrikes. The Druze are Arabic-speaking people who follow a unique religion. They're an offshoot of Shia Islam. Founded in the 11th century, the faith emphasizes monotheism, reincarnation, and the pursuit of spiritual truth. Their community spans from Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan to the Golan Heights. For much of Syria's civil war, the Druze avoided direct confrontation with Damascus. But since Bashar al-Assad's fall in December 2024, tensions have risen. The new interim president, Ahmed al-Shara, once a member of Al-Qaeda, promised to protect minorities.
I also address the Druze people, who are an integral part of the fabric of this nation. Syria will never be a place for division or fragmentation, or sowing discord among its people. We assure you that protecting your rights and freedom is one of our priorities, and we reject any effort that aims to drag you to an external party or to create division within our ranks.
The interim government claims it is protecting the Druze community, but reports say otherwise. A UK-based war monitor has accused government forces of carrying out summary executions of Druze civilians. The allegations have deepened mistrust between the Druze and the regime in Damascus. The Druze groups fear that Islamist dominance and forced conscription could increase control over their communities. In fact, clashes have erupted in Syria as the government tries to assert authority in Suweda. The Druze community is deeply divided. Some leaders urge cooperation with Damascus. Others, like Hikmat al-Hajari, who's the spiritual leader of the Druze community, have called for resistance and have appealed to Israel and global powers for help. But not all of the Druze community supports these calls. Lebanon's top Druze leader, Walid Jumblat, has warned against relying on Israel, accusing it of exploiting sectarian rifts.
This is part of Israel's conspiracy. Israel uses some Druze to stir unrest in Syria under the guise of protection. Israel protects no one. It exploits everyone to serve its interests and threaten the security of Arab states.
Israel says it is stepping in to protect Druze civilians. On 15th July, it launched airstrikes in Sveda. After Syrian government troops were dispatched to quell sectarian clashes in the region. And a day later, it hit Syria's Ministry of Defense in Damascus and launched strikes near the presidential palace. Israel claims it is trying to stop the build-up of Islamist fighters near its border and opposes Syrian army deployments in the south. In Israel, there are over 150,000 Druze community members currently. Unlike Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel, several Druze Arabs are also serving in the Israeli military and police, including on the front lines in Gaza. Hence, their concerns cannot be ignored.
We have set forth a clear policy, demilitarization of the region south of Damascus, from the Golan Heights and to the Druze mountain area. That's number one. Number two is protecting the brothers of our brothers, the Druze and the Druze mountain. Both were broken by the regime in Damascus. They sent troops south of Damascus into the region that has to be demilitarized and began slaughtering the Druze. That we cannot accept in any way.
Since the fall of Syria's former president Bashar al-Assad, Israel has been reaching out to the Druze communities near its northern border, trying to build ties with Syrian minorities. Israel has long positioned itself as a protector of groups like the Kurds, Alawites and Druze, even as it strikes military targets inside Syria. The world is watching closely. The US has voiced deep concern, promising action to end the violence. It has also opposed Israeli strikes in Syria. Arab states including Egypt, Jordan and Saudi Arabia have also condemned the Israeli strikes. Iran and Turkey say Israel is destabilizing Syria. And the United Nations has called for restraint and warned against escalating the conflict further. With al-Sharat's Islamist-led government facing armed opposition and Israel striking military sites, the region is on the edge once again. While the road ahead is uncertain, the Druze fear losing autonomy. The government wants control, and Israel says it wants security. If violence continues, Syria risks slipping back into chaos. Whether dialogue or division prevails remains to be seen.
And from all of our team here at Firstpost, we thank all of you for tuning in, not just today, but every day. We hope you have an amazing weekend, and we look forward to seeing you right back here again next week. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.